All right. Here we go. So I am like completely thrilled to have you guys all here with us today. It is a great honor to be a part of your lives. I know most of you, friends of mine in the network, in the DC area, and most importantly in the tech space for the better part of, 15, 20 years. It's insane how long we've all known each other. But there's a lot going on in the world today, and this event couldn't be better timed. So just a couple of things up front, just as a short icebreaker. And forgive me, I'm gonna look at my notes here, but raise your hand. Look at that. Raise your hand if you are an engineering leader, if you're a technologist. Raise your hand if you're a product leader. Some of you, hands, I saw that, John. Any investors in the room? Anybody investing in companies? Yep, Laura, yep. Any clients of Victory Square in the room? Yep. Ashamed to admit it? No, hopefully not. And anybody who's tinkering around with AI these days? Yeah, all of us, right? And anyone, raise your hand if you know exactly what's going to happen with AI and how you're implementing it in the future in the next, let's just say 3 months. Yeah, Chris Danilek, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. So, I mean, the point is we have some really smart people here in the room. We have a lot of operators in the room, people who are not just sitting in the ivory tower, but are on the front lines building products responsible for the direction of the future of their companies. This is a great group of people. We know it because we know most of you, all of you, but I hope you guys get a chance to collaborate and get to know each other throughout this event and certainly in the happy hour. So a couple of things I wanted to do just from the start, just to introduce my team, just so you know who's in the room here. First and foremost, my co-founder, Marius Benich. Most of you know Marius. If you don't, please get to know him. But the two of us 7 years ago, I convinced him 7 years ago to do this crazy adventure with us, and all credit due to my friend Jeff Nielsen. Where are you, Jeff? I know you're here. There's Jeff right in front here, who gave us a chance to work with him at his company that he was innovating and starting. So anyhow, Marius Benich, for everyone. Just so you know what's in the room, I'm going to introduce these two gentlemen later on. Matt Walnock, who's the head of our AI and advisor services. Vlad Damian, who's the head of our delivery team. Andre Laza, where are you, Andre? Andre is one of our client partners. Katie Conaway is our head of finance. Maria is my executive assistant, who many of you probably have interacted with and doing a lot of operations for the event. Tyler, who's on our, where are you, Tyler? Tyler is probably out there. He's on our AI team. So great for you guys to get to know all the people on our side as well. So just to know who's in the room for us. And most of you know who Victory Square is, but not all of you. Some of you are new to us. And so just as a, kind of how we got to this moment of time, like I said, 7 years ago, Marius and I started this company, and we're passionate about services. I love services because you're never actually, ironically, the guy on the stage as I talk, right? The heroes are the people, our clients, right? They're the ones who are making an impact, going out there, serving their clients. And I love supporting people. It's part of the joys in life of getting up in the morning and thinking, okay, how do I make this person's life better? And when you go back to sleep at night, you think, hey, this was a lot of fun. I got to see my friends Nora and Ellen again. I said, going around the room and hugging people because you're in the trenches with people and you really make a difference in their lives. We spend a lot of time at work. This is an important responsibility we have, not just in our families and our culture, in our families and our businesses, but even in our culture and society of contributing to building and creating, which is a lot of fun. So, but for us, we've been doing this for the past 7 years. Our kind of focus is on startup, high growth companies who are innovative, disrupting, on the offense. Our focus has always been, and this is a lot of Jeff's kind of influence in our life, but small, nimble teams. We aren't, we're engineers, and I've learned this through Vlad, but we're not zealots. We don't think, okay, it has got to be this one technology. We're engineers, but we think about the business first. We've talked to a number of people over time who love to engineer. There's a lot of engineers in the room here, But sometimes the dangers of engineering is over-engineering and making it overly complex. So we're not hipsters, we're pragmatic. We want to think about the business first. Mike and I were talking, where's Mike Alver? Mike and I were talking over lunch today. He's like, hey, business first, Paul. What can we do on the business side? That's exactly the right attitude to have that we have. But we're product builders, we're pragmatic, we're disciplined, process-proven guys. And yes, we care about our craft, but we care more about the impact we're having on the business. And we care about creating value. So just have a sense of who we are today. With this innovation, with this really, honestly, this complete disruption, a new age of AI, we are like giddy with excitement of what is freaking possible. And so it's, like I said earlier, it's perfectly timed for this conversation today. Let me just share with you what's going to happen today, and we'll get right into it. So today, Matt is going to start us off. Matt's going to give a presentation, of course, with permission. One of our clients, we're going to demonstrate. He would be with us here today, but he couldn't make it out. He lives in Utah, right?
He's going to South by Southwest to launch the app that we built for him.
I love it. Okay. So yeah, so he is off doing what we want him to do, right? Being creative and being disruptive, right? But he was gracious enough, and Matt will explain who this person is. He's gracious enough to do a video with us, an interview that Matt and he had last Thursday, just to describe what we did together. So Matt's going to walk through with you live here how we did it and what we did. Okay, that's about an hour. Okay, and we'll have some probably interjections from Vlad and myself and help Matt, Pepper, just keep on his toes. It's good for Matt. And then in the second hour, we'll have a panel conversation. And so Matt and Vlad will come up, stand up here, sit up here, whatever it might be. And we have lots of different topics because there's lots of different avenues and rabbit holes we can go down. We'll put up a QR code, right? You guys will be able to see all the various areas which we can talk about. So you guys can say, hey, what about this? What about that? But they've got a couple teed up. So we'll have a panel discussion. And then around 5:25, we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up around 5:25. I'll have a couple closing thoughts. And then we can go and drink together for those of you who are able to hang out with us for a little longer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So the project is, as Paul alluded to, we're going to get into what it was, who it was with, what it was about. You're going to get to hear from Dr. Stock itself. But the premise of starting this project was to force ourselves to use all the tools available in a constrained environment. The application that we built, Dr. Stock funded it through grant money. It was a fixed price engagement. So we started off a lot that needed to get done with very little resource to do it with. He'll tell you more about what it's about and how we put it together. But the point is that we used all the techniques that we had. I was able to lead a small engineering team. First it was one engineer, and then we brought that up to two. But the way we kept ourselves organized, we worked through 2 months of engineering, and I tell folks this was the first time I've ever successfully run complete sprints, and they were 1 week sprints. And I'm just like, but it's really the techniques that I'm going to show you that were responsible for our ability to do that. So what is specification-driven development? We're going to talk through the definition. We're going to compare it to other software development lifecycle processes that we're all familiar with. And spec-driven is not a new concept. It's just very attainable now that we have the tools and the AI systems that we have. We're going to look at it in practice. I'm going to show you what we do to manage the application spec. And then we're going to talk about your engineers. We're going to talk about what this means to them, what skills they need to have to drive a process like this, and how you keep yourself in a more scaled environment than maybe what you're going to see here, how you organize yourself around the specification. So specification, we've always wanted as engineering leaders, technical leaders, as architects, to have all the requirements when we start. We wanted to make all the decisions before we sit down and write the code. The specification is about knowing what it is we're going to build and what our goals are. It's less about how we're going to build it, at least to start. When we look at the various techniques that we've had in the past to use, we're all familiar, call it waterfall, call it traditional SDLC. We gather all of our requirements, we do our design work, we implement, we test, we deploy, we maintain, and then we figure out all the stuff that we didn't think about, and we go back to the beginning and we do it again. And around we go. So the traditional waterfall SDLC, when you're going to put an engineering team on it, we invented Agile to accommodate the shortcomings of this, where we now can sort of loop and interrupt ourselves and run this cycle in a much shorter duration than we otherwise classically would. We also have test-driven development. So when we found that we were missing things in our requirements, when we weren't sure we had everything finished, when we weren't sure we had it right, we said, well, rather than trying to write code from the written word, let's write code that tests code. When the tests are red, we're not finished. When the tests turn green, we're done. So the premise of test-driven development is really straightforward. In practice, I think when you get busy, when you get under pressure, you have just as much success writing your test first as you did writing your documentation first. In other words, you don't. The teams get crunched, they do their best to keep up, but these processes, the way of going about this was, of our own creation. We engineered a process, and then we expected the humans to be able to keep up with the process that the engineers put in place. And it falls short. We've always struggled with, as I said, maintaining sprint integrity, make sure our backlogs are in order. I don't think I'm saying anything that anybody in this room has not experienced 10 times over. So what happened when the agents arrived, when we were able to start generating code faster? Well, we would think that would solve our problem. We would think that, we don't need to worry about the requirements so much. We can just code it. Just tell me what you need, and I'll put it in code, and we'll ship it right away. We still have a loop. We still need to gather information and then quickly turn it around, but we're iterating within the code. And we ship it out to production without all the pomp and circumstance. And in some cases, that's wonderful. Obvious use cases, product managers want to be able to communicate more effectively what it is they want the product to be able to do. Engineers want to be able to show each other designs and not have to fully commit the code or spend a bunch of time building backends for it. You might want to put this in the hand of your customers, your prospects, your investors. There's lots of reasons to generate a single page app that shows off what you're trying to do without being the full app. There's also full stack vibe coding, which we can talk a little bit about as well. But if you just consider the idea that an engineer can sit and communicate with an agent in a session and iterate on code until they're happy with what they have. The challenge with all of these is where we end up finding our mistakes and where we end up having to go back and redo work. So in the traditional sense, if we didn't detect it at design and we didn't detect it at the testing, any gaps that we have in our fulfillment of the application's goals are going to be found at the most expensive spot after they've been shipped to production and we're rewriting code. Same thing starts to happen when we look at the test-driven development. We haven't changed where we're iterating. We're still iterating on code. We just have a bit of a safety net in front of us now to tell us when we're falling out of line. But you still find all of your shortcomings here at the end, and you're still iterating on your code. In spec-driven development, we iterate on the spec. We iterate on the least expensive place. We've learned this to an extent with our design tools, using Figma, setting up design systems where we learn that iterating in the design is far, far cheaper than iterating in the code. Iterating in the spec is even cheaper than that, if you can set yourself up correctly. So what's the problem with vibe coding? Why can't we just embrace this and say that solves the problem? We can get this code written as quickly as we can think of it. When we think about putting that into an operational context at scale, it's non-deterministic. I can sit down with the same prompt at a different time, potentially a new version of the model, and get a completely different set of code out of it. There's no audit trail. There's no way to replay what just happened as I sat there in vibe code. I can remember the conversation, but again, I might not get the same answer when I replay that conversation. We skip over all the lessons we've learned. I mean, yes, it's new. Yes, it's fast. Yes, we can do more with it, but does it mean we throw out all the lessons we've learned over the last few decades? No. We have to merge the two worlds together. And as I said, it's expensive to iterate on your most expensive artifact, and that being the code. Fundamentally, we want to stop guessing. We want the LLM to stop guessing at what we want. We want to be able to communicate with it fully. We also want to be able to do this with more than one person sitting at the keyboard. Vibe coding happens in a very one-on-one way. I don't take a team of engineers and point them at a problem and say, you all go vibe code it. You're not going to find success there. They're all going to be stepping on each other's toes. Or you end up with 4 or 5 different unconnected solutions. So how do we start to resolve this? We put the spec in the middle of what we're doing. We can use the same tools that we use to generate code, to generate specification, to check that specification against inputs that we've received from our stakeholders, be that a recorded refinement meeting, a Slack conversation, comments in a Jira ticket, because of the way that our agents can interconnect with these systems via MCP, which you'll see here in a little bit. We can bring all of that together in one place, process it in one place, and have one artifact that comes out the other side that fully defines our specification. It becomes the single source of truth. It becomes, rather than the code being the single source of truth, your application spec becomes the single source of truth, and everything you generate downstream of the specification is generated. Everything downstream is generated. You need to write tests, you point your agents at your spec, and you have it write your tests. If you need to write further requirements, you need to write a technical article, a blog post, a presentation for executives, your tickets in Jira, managing your backlog. All of that can be derived from a well-maintained application spec with very little overhead. So the work that we used to do as engineering managers, product managers, technical leads, always to make sure that our team had the backlog full for next sprint. That was always the mission. Make sure the backlog's ready for the team. Otherwise, we're blocking them. We're slowing them down. It all falls on our shoulders. You can do this work now on a regular basis without spending your whole time focused on it. What you're going to see, the process I went through, we had 3 stand-ups a week. I spent maybe 4 or 5 hours maintaining the application spec over the course of the week, and the engineers had what they needed every morning. I was working with the team in Romania, so we're offset by 7 hours. I would usually, in the evening when it was quiet, sit there and do my processing of the application spec. I'd put my head on the pillow at 11 o'clock at night. They wake up at the equivalent of 2 in the morning here, and they're off to work. They have what they need. As I worked with the team, the 2 developers we had on it, they were new both to the project and to the company, so they hadn't sort of seen some of the other ways that we've trained our teams to build code. By the time we had done this 2 and 6 week, 8 week project together, I was going to send them back to the Vlad. The project had wound down, and they looked at me and said, "Do not take our tools from us. This has been the best experience we've had as developers. We've had the answers in front of us when we needed them. Don't take our tools from us." And I looked at him and said, "Don't take tools from them. Otherwise we're going to," and that led to the manifestation of those tools within our organization, and we're rolling them out to everybody, and everyone's receiving a training on what you're about to see. Yes, sir.
Non-deterministic.
Mm-hmm.
That's inherent to the model. How do we solve for that?
Through the specification. Hold that question.
Yeah.
Let me get to yes, but right on. And this last piece is just speaking to the fact that, again, we're iterating in a place, we're iterating in the least expensive way to make changes. Where nothing's been written into code, nothing's been put onto a system, we're not spinning cycles in a cloud environment, we're deciding what we need to do before we set off to do it. Yes, sir. Is that any better? Joke's on you. Let me see. No, it won't even zoom for me. All right, well, let me take you through the project, and hopefully I can point and wave, and we'll try to make it a little bit bigger here as I go. Let me jump into what is the specification. Let's look at what we're actually producing here. So the documentation itself is a full description of the stack. The way this project got started, Dr. Stock, Dr. Gregory Stock, and I'll introduce him in a minute, came, said, "I've got grant money, got a fixed scope, we've got 2 phases we need to go through." And he showed up with a designer in Finland, Nicholas, who was wonderful to work with. So we had some artifacts for what the front end needed to look like, but that was it. We sat down and we interviewed them. We spent, I guess there was probably 4 or 5 hours total over the course of 2 weeks, having them talk through what it is they wanted. What they had tried to build this in the past with another team and failed, so they had some prior wounds that they wanted to express and make sure we took care of. But this entire document was derived of those conversations being recorded, processed through to text, and myself and my team looking at it through the architectural perspective to then start to fill in the blanks and say, okay, we want to use Vercel for our hosting container. We're going to use Supabase for our back end. Started picking the technology. So it showed us what we knew and what we didn't know from the requirements perspective, and then allowed us to fill in the gaps. And as we made those decisions, it keeps it consistent across all the sections. So if I change something in the data model and it impacts the API, it'll go change the API as well. That's the benefit of managing. I'll show you the structure of it, but the specification is not one gigantic document. It's a number of smaller documents which can fit into a context well and works well for an LLM to manage. But you can see architecture, data model, workflows, the feature specification. So this was the list of features that we had to build. I'll say this here and then we'll get into letting Dr. Stock tell us a little bit more. The application itself in two parts. You scan a QR code, you start answering some questions that provides data for research, and then there's a chat variant of it. So we've got the QR system, authentication, dealing with the admin interface, group chat. All of these features were spoken into existence. They showed up with some pictures and we talked through to generate this level of detail. And then this is where a big distinction between, a vibe coded solution you're going to put in production and a team like ours that's going to build it. Security, privacy, testing, DevOps, integrations, all the things you need to scale and operate an application once you build it, get layered in by our team and our level of expertise. So the client didn't come up and say, I want you to host it in Vercel and I want it to have 256-bit encryption. We layer that in. He just says, I need it available 5 nines and here's where it's going to be deployed. We fill in the rest. So that's what the specification looks like. The project itself, it's grant funded and there's more depth to the chat half of it. But the question part is launching with his book, his latest book. He's also got it positioned in various blog posts. There's a couple of other research articles that I think it's going to land in. But this idea of collecting answers to questions, studying those answers, studying the people that gave him is the center of everything that Dr. Stock has done in his career. We're excited. Like I said, he's putting it on stage at South by Southwest along with the book. We're expecting a lot of traffic this afternoon as things warm up. And the second half of the application, which we just finished a couple of weeks ago, is to continue that research in live interactions. So the same question experience happens, but now you have a collection of people that are matched and put into a group together to continue the conversation. That's actually being funded by some research dollars. If that's successful, that'll continue to grow, and Dr. Stock will be back for phase 3, 4, and 5. So we've got that planned right now. He's taking it out and getting us a bunch of feedback. It was great. The project was really wonderful to work on with him. He's such an interesting perspective on the world and our condition as humans. The part that I want to emphasize is while he said the word spec, he saw a refined version. He saw snippets of what we were trying to decide at the time. He never read the 250-page markdown document that was the result of our work together. And that's the real benefit, one of the real benefits of taking all of your decisions. I mean, that's really what the specification is. It's the collection of every decision you've made about the product that you're building, whether that decision was made in a team meeting with your CEO in front of you, by a customer. All of those decisions end up in the application spec and therefore can feed all the work that you're going to get downstream. Let me take you just on a couple more sections of the spec, because it's not just what's the architecture and what are the features. It's also it's a living document. So as I would process these after our meetings, we end up with a decision log. And this is a lengthy log. You can see here the decision that was made, the timestamp from the recording from which it was pulled, as well as the actual quote. We've got all of our artifacts in every meeting we've ever had on the subject in an archive that we can go back and reference. But anytime we had a question of why did we do that? What was that about? When did we decide that? I don't search this, I don't read this. I ask Claude to go do it, but I can ask it a question that's got all the context of our decision history without having to keep it in memory all the time. That's just to show you how long it's been going on. We have all of our future work here as well. So these are things that I couldn't have managed this project with Dr. Stock without this tool, just from the amount of change control that we did. He came in and had a very firm idea of what the question part was, had less of a firm idea of what the chat section was, and even as we walked through and started building the question section with him, we'd deliver something at the end of the week. He would look at it and go, oh man, we didn't think of that. Him and the designer were off on the weekend. Sunday night, we had emails from Dr. Stock going, here's the changes we want. I would process them in the morning with the team as part of our planning, and we would reset ourselves for the week. But anything major that impacted scoping, we're still on a fixed budget, and there were a couple of them that we had to swap features out. But I was able to track it, I was able to size it, I was able to give him accurate estimates. You heard him talk about the accuracy of what we were doing. There was one surprise along the way, but not from this. It was more to do with where the QR code was being placed. But that aside, we were very easily able to get him into a context. We would prep him by saying, here's the list of tickets. We would draw from the specification a document, say, this is what we're going to talk about. We'd walk into the meeting. We'd get our decisions. It was recorded. I didn't have to sit there and take notes. I could pay attention to him and extract the information I needed. And then post-processing it back into the application spec gave me an opportunity to sit in the moment, collect the information, walk away for a period of time and let it do its thing, and then revisit it as I'm processing it through to make the decisions that needed to be made to keep the requirements flowing to the team. There were some things that we did along the way that just didn't make sense, and they would get tossed out at that point of refinement. But the ability to maintain where we started, where we're going, and every decision that we made along the way was invaluable to keep the project on track. This was the other one that we used a lot. Again, Dr. Stock never saw the risk list. I watched the risk list and I raised the issues as they came up. And we worked our way through mitigating those risks. I will say that when Dr. Stock said, we were in the project with them, we came up with good ideas when we found gaps. I would say we came up with half of the good ideas when we found gaps and Claude came up with the rest. And we merged those two worlds together pretty effectively to position decisions for the designer and Dr. Stock to make asynchronously as well as with us in refinement sessions. So again, the document's not meant to be read. You can certainly read it. I have, as I'm working with it, the owner of the document would tend to read it, but it's meant to be the corpus of decisions that have been made about the project and a reference for not just what we're going to build downstream, but the automation we're going to put around it. How do you take a junior developer and bring them into your project? The typical experience we've had with that is you hand them the onboarding, you hand them the guide to set up their environment, and you tell them to fix everything that's wrong with that guide as they run into problems. And good luck, we'll see you in a week. With this, the developers would show up. Not only do they have a grounding in everything that we're doing and where we're at in the project, the environment is automatically set up for them via skill. They are given instruction on where code goes within that architecture without having to read this document fully, but then they can sit and interrogate via Claude the ins and outs of the document. We had, at first, Alex was with us. He was with it for a month, I think, a little more than a month. He was Vlad called him the nuclear option. He's a senior developer, fully capable up and down the stack. He left the project around the new year and we added a front-end developer and a back-end developer. And I was concerned when that happened because this was all packed into one dude's brain. And we got it out on paper and hopefully that's going to transition. And it did. Our engineers were able to show up. It's not as if you can take somebody that has no idea what front-end code looks like and say, go, the spec will answer all of your questions. But at the same time, they had a backlog of tickets. Those tickets had all the information that they needed to accomplish the task. And most importantly, everything was cross-referenced. So if they had a question that wasn't answered in the ticket, they could come back to the spec and look at it, or they could send Claude off to go do it. So that's the structure of what we were working with as the documentation and the application spec itself. I'm going to, let's go back over here for a second. So what was the activity? I mentioned this a couple of times, whether it was a refinement session or we had to do a one-off with the designer, but any time we met with the client, the recorder was on. We knew something was going to be said. We knew we were going to miss something. And even if there's 5 of us on the call, we hear it 5 different ways. We needed a source of truth that can be then fed down this pipeline. We would take we circle back. I don't like a lot of its features, but it's really good at capturing a transcript, so we keep it around for that. And then you're going to see me, I'll show you how we run it through the LLM for a review using a skill, and then that would result in the update. I showed you the 12 sections. probably closer to 30 by the time we were done with all the meetings that we had. 8 big change orders. I mean, from the scope we started with, we ended up kind of over here with what got swapped in. And then the big refinement sessions we had with Dr. Stock and his team, there were 5 of those along the way. And again, this was about an 8-week project, so it's not super long running, but there was plenty to do, and we needed to get everything complete on the budget that he had so he could get this launched.
Hey, Matt,
Yes, sir.
you open up digging some questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask a question about because how to generate tickets from a spec is pretty straightforward.
Uh-huh.
But how to manage existing tickets and changes based on future decisions.
How are you
Doing back and forth between the backlog. And can you repeat the question?
Yep. So the question was, how do I deal with the back and forth? Once the tickets are generated and they're downstream, how does any changes there or decisions make their way back to the application spec?
Or
Back, if you do a change in the application spec, how do you update all the existing tickets if there's new information?
The key to that is, and it's not magic, it's just cross-referencing, but you you instruct the agents as it's decomposing the app spec into the tickets to make sure those references are stayed intact. And I'm going to show you the actual process of it, but what you're going to see is the spec gets updated first based on the decisions I make, and then we tell it, go check all the tickets. And because it knows where the epics live, it doesn't load all the tickets in the project, it can go target it, and it'll pull that up and it'll show me, here's what we think is impacted, yay or nay. Traceability.
Are you doing the tickets in Jira or in Git?
Jira. Let me actually just jump over there and I'll show you. So I'm gonna do the thing you're not supposed to do, and I'm gonna demo live here. This is, yeah, in prod. No. This is how I spend my day now. I was joking with Vlad. I've spent more time on the command line in the last 3 months than I have in my entire career. We've got Claude, CLI on the right, Visual Studio on the left. I like using Visual Studio in this setting, managing documentation, because we're treating the documentation like code. We're treating it like it's going to be under change control. We want to be able to do diffs. I want to be able to see everything that changed as it's changing without having to reread all of it. So I have a skill set up, and I'm going to ask it to review the transcripts. So I had a stand-up meeting with Christina this morning. Yep.
Wasting tokens now.
Hence is, I can type this morning. Mm-hmm. I'm giving it a little extra instruction just to make sure it follows the path that I want it to. Again, non-deterministic. I have a skill set up, and the skill's job is to reach out to Circleback, run a search, find the meetings that I'm talking about, one or more of them, pull those transcripts back. It will then drop it over here into the transcripts directory, where we have a little bit of a structure for an inbox and a structure of what's been processed. You can see here, this is all of our transcripts that we've processed through. The reason I do this is in case I need to start a new session, it gets interrupted. I've got most of the work done before I'm ready to start making decisions about what lands in the spec itself. So the prompt is saying, use that skill, the transcript review skill. Review this morning's stand-up meeting for the Socratic Sciences project. I'd like to approve the changes to the spec and to Jira. And we're going to let it go. While that's going, I'll show you a couple of other things. So get this out of the way. All right, so it is talking to my MCP server that's connected to Circleback. It's gone off to read the meetings. It's got the transcripts for the meetings. Good, I have the full meeting details in the transcript. Let's do that. It's gonna put it in, it's making a directory. Oh, that's interesting. It decided to make a new category. I'm gonna let it go ahead and do that. I would probably correct it if I was, but I will let it go ahead and make a new directory for now. This takes a second to pull the transcript down and drop it in, so I can come over here for a second and talk to you about it. Now, while that's doing that, oh, Oh, interesting. It did it in the other order. Yeah, okay. It read it and then it wrote it instead of going the other way. So it's capturing the transcript, it's putting it into this bit of a workflow here locally, and then it's going to go through and then present me with my decisions that I need to make. While it's doing this, I'm usually either looking at Jira to see what the state of the current sprint is or the state of the backlog, because usually I'm trying to pay attention to what's in flight. You're still not able to take your planning brain out completely, although it does help a lot. You still need to make those judgment calls about how you're going to manage your team. And then I'll spend time going back over the PRs that we have in GitHub and see where we're at in that. And if I'm still waiting on this to come back, I have another agent running off doing something else. To come back a little bit to your question while that's running, this is the downstream direction for the changes, and we'll spec Jira. Once a sprint, at the end of the sprint, I'll take the code base and I have a skill that reverses that. So I will take the data model as it sits defined in the code, and I will compare it to our development database. I will look at the exposed endpoints that we have on the back end and make sure they align with the way they're defined in the spec. And I've only found one or two where it was off by a little bit. It was never wildly hallucinating because I kept it sort of constrained to this piece of the code, this change to the code, this piece of the spec, and it was able to maintain that context fairly well.
Did you wind up just regenerating the entire application? Just say, okay, let's just flush what we have and regenerate.
So we recently did an internationalization feature. We had built the app, and then that was one of our big change controls. He said, "Oh, I need this in 20 languages, right?" So we agentically wrote that code based on the specification, but it was our front-end developer spent maybe a couple of hours trying to work her way through it on her own. And we got to stand up and I said, is Claude doing that for you? She goes, "No, I know what the packages I'm supposed to do." And I said, "Just let Claude take a shot at it and then come back." Half an hour later, she was done. The front end had been, it was the internationalization package for React had been deployed. All of the strings had been extracted and replaced. The back-end developer was working on caching because we were translating live with Google Translate. So she was building a caching implementation. By the time we'd reached the end of the day, it was in test. It was a day after we said we needed to go do this. And I was like, okay, we're in a different world now. It took us, obviously testing, and we had to make it resilient. So we spent, a decent chunk of time in the sprint verifying all of it. But from here's the idea to here it is in the specification to here it is from generating the code, it was less than 36 hours between the two teams.
And you made that as a change, not as a fresh,
Correct. We were well into the code at that point. He showed up and asked me that, and I was like, you need that when? Okay, so we wrote the transcript. I can open the transcript and show it to you. What else can I tell you about the project while we're waiting here a second? Do I assume that Claude will fix a bug if we find it? Yes, that was the assumption. It would come back through this flow. So if we found something in testing, typically I would sit there just with a console open and I'd speak tickets into existence as I was testing. So I could be doing a thing, go, "Oh, that's broken, fix this." I'd have a log of those and then process them through the same way. I'm trying to think if there was an occasion where we were smarter than the LLM in coming up with a solution. There's probably one, they were closer to it than I was day to day, but I can't recall something off the top of my head. Bugs go through Jira as well. Yes. Yeah. Oh, the cost on the tokens? It's very manageable when you're dealing with the application spec. Setting the code cost aside, this is very cheap. You're dealing with small pieces of text rather than the entire 200-page document. You're also dealing with snippets of conversation. So this is probably the most expensive thing I'm doing right now is to process the transcript and the tokens it takes to get it over. Okay. Here we go. I'll come back to your question. So it says, you mentioned you'd like to approve the changes to the spec in Jira. Let me compare these items for you. So what I have in the skill is I don't just want a list of tell me what's different. I want it categorized so that I can work with it in kind. Here's the decisions that we made. A couple of examples. We're going to keep it in 12 languages in development before we put it in production. Right now, production is just English and Spanish. We made a decision on one of our session PRs. The feedback link needs to go in. That's something we added this morning. So there's a series of decisions that we made on the project. There's some requirements changes that happened. The soft delete needed to go in. We wanted to change the default session timer, so those requirements got updated. A couple of clarifications on how we're working with Vercel and Mixpanel, and then a number of action items. These are general. I usually don't process the action items through downstream. I have another route where they go to Monday and land on my task board. This is just for me to see it in context and go, oh yeah, that's everything that we said we were going to do. And then any blockers we have. This will also pull out risks, open questions and risks. And now it's going to say, all right, what do you want to do? So I'm going to process all the decisions, all the requirements, all the clarifications, none of the actions, all of the blockers, and all the open questions. So let's process. It'll figure that out. Okay. Now it's going to work its way through and start updating the application spec. Your question was?
I have a ton of questions that I will ask you
In the second part. Okay.
No, it was about the non-deterministic behavior.
Wow, yes.
The first block from your
Vibe coding.
vibe coding, exactly. And unfortunately, it's clear that the spec helps, but to what degree? But we'll get there.
You'll also notice just in terms of the utilization, obviously Claude tells you your token, but the thing to notice here is that it's not load star.star into context. It's, I know what you're talking about. It's in the data model file. I know where the data model part of the specification is. I'll load and go through that. Okay, ready to apply all of these plus the decision logs, and it's off to do that work. Yeah, it's a Git project. And then when I'm done with these updates, I'll have it push that up and commit it. Local copy. Yeah, local copy. So we made an update to the data model. Yep, there's our soft delete going in. This is for privacy. The session duration went into the privacy section. The stuff on Vercel is going into the DevOps. The Vercel log retention needs to go in. Feature got updated. It's going too quick for me to read. And then we killed the risk. We switched to risk. We changed the risk. This isn't the way you read the change control. That's why I have Visual Studio open. So we'll let that finish. And it's updating the specification log. So the reason I use Visual Studio is I like to remember the days when I actually wrote code. No, I'm kidding. You can see here now, like yesterday. You can see here that because I'm treating the documentation like code, it's able to show me the differences very easily. I can come down here, find that little green spot, what changed here, that changed. And this is the lengthy part of what I do when I'm processing this document, is I'm going through each of the updates it's making to the spec, and I'm making sure that's still in line. That's how I eliminate some of the non-deterministic behavior. It's the human in the loop at this point to tell me that I've gotten it right. We updated the data model, the feature specification, all the parts that we saw going by, but I try to catch them as they're going by if I see it in the corner of my eye, but this is where I go to finalize the changes that are being made. Yes, sir?
This is not staged, by the way.
No, this was from this morning's stand-up. That's why I'm kind of reading it live in front of you. Make sure I don't mess up my spec. What job am I doing? What role on the team am I playing? I'd like to say product owner. I'd like to say that, but I'm also playing CTO. I'm playing technician here and making the technology choices.
Can I do it without a Mac?
You can, because you just asked the skill to split the decisions. These are technical, these are product. Let's see, so it went through. You'll notice here in my MCP calls, it ran searches against Jira. Again, because the specification grew up first and all of the tickets were derived from the specification, they're all cross-linked with each other. It saw which areas of the spec it updated. It knew which tickets to go read. It pulls them into context and tells me, all right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tickets to change, 1 to create, and these 2 were part of the conversation, but there's nothing to do to them. So I'm just going to say approve all these. And now it's going to go off and update Jira with those changes. So I'm adding comments, I'm creating a ticket, I'm going to add it to the right epic. When this is done, I then go open up, I usually have Jira on my other monitor, so I actually kind of see the tickets popping up as this is happening. And then I go and I make sure I've got everything in the right place for the team. It makes it so much easier to make sure I've got a good sprint when the tickets are full of context, full of the detail that they need.
And so the workflow is still for a developer to pick up a ticket, we'll vibe code it, make sure that they're the human in the loop.
They're the human in the loop to get it built, yes. We did get to a spot where there were some changes. We were ready to let the automation run and just make a special column on the Jira board, and any ticket that hit that would go to the agents automatically. We're going to get there in another week or so, but we haven't fully lit that up. This is where, when the developer got engaged and they're going through the ticket, they're finding, again, where there might be some gaps in the thinking. Claude was also suggesting solutions to those as well. Let's go right back into the feedback loop. So here we go. Process complete. We did today's transcript. It's been processed. Here's the sections that were updated. The decision log's been updated. And here's the list of tickets that we changed in Jira. And then I go to bed. That's the end. They get up in the morning and they go. So why do all this? Why feed 2 developers well-written tickets? Well, 1, it's a better experience. I'm able to keep on a tight schedule and a tight budget. Once.
No, how many times do you generate the code from the spec? Per day.
Oh, that depends on the developer. That's their decision at the moment. So if they're working on a ticket. How many times does the code get generated from the spec? And right now that's in the hands of the developer. We let them decide when it's time to turn the crank and regen the code or to modify what it is they're working on.
Is a developer a developer?
The developers are developers, yes. No, it's a valid question. No, it's I don't know. Totally valid.
Hey, Matt, we got one back here for you too.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you going to automate this so that you could just wake up in the morning or in the evening and the second part of that comes in and you're like, yeah, that's all good. Have you already done that already?
Yes. This is the hand crank of it. But when if I let it sit and I don't get to it in the evening, by the time I get up in the morning, it's done. And if there's any questions about decisions it makes, it does not process it through to the team. So the team, it's always confusion for me, never for them. Other question back there? Oops.
This is great. As CEO and company product manager,
We're halfway through a product, and we've just, obviously
to lessons once we brew and
embraced using AI development. How do we transition into this model?
Okay. Great question. And I should have put the picture in that I had, so I'm going to try and hand wave in front of you a little bit. Imagine your code base as a collection of modules, all in free space. But those modules work together to accomplish a goal. Maybe I've got 3 or 4 that work together to process video. I got another one that writes out text. I got another one that is sending emails, for example. The way that the humans see that, the way that we approach the problem is those are logically grouped and we know why they're there and we remember their intent and we remember what it's about. And maybe that's just part of our team or we've gotten written down as part of our requirements. But I understand that this goes together and that maybe a module in there calls a module over here, maybe this one calls one over here, maybe this one calls one over there. But the logical blocks of what the system's composed of, I can keep in my head. When you let an agent, an LLM show up and they don't have any of that context. They don't have any of that knowledge. They see a landscape of modules that call each other. So the first thing you need to do to get ready is to get your code base ready, is to take ownership of the components and start to draw lines around where you're going to write specification. This is a fairly straightforward system, so we maintained one specification document. If you've got a system and some others that I know of that are widespread enterprise class systems, you're going to have tens to hundreds of specifications. It's going to be drawing the boundaries around what is a component and then focusing the humans on the interface of that component while you let the LLM work on what's inside it. Does that make sense? We work in big blocks. Let the machine work on the tiny blocks. That gets us decent segue into the skills you need to drive a system like this as an engineer and as a team lead. The first thing is the thing we've been doing for years, is prompt crafting. You still need to be able to write a good prompt. You still need to be able to structure it well and not spend a ton of tokens letting the LLM run out into weird spaces. But we have to add to that. It's not just about the prompt anymore. Context. Until very recently, Vlad and I have been working on this conversation we're about to have in front of you for a couple of months. We've been talking through topics and collecting them. First week of February, we had to throw half of them out. Because what changed is the context got way bigger. They got more autonomous. I can run teams of agents now. My son is graduating from Penn State in May as an AI engineer, so I gave him this presentation last night. And showed them the structure of the teams. Teams themselves are MD files. I've got a front-end engineer that's defined as a team member. I've got a back-end engineer that's defined as a team member. I've got a team that puts them together, and then I set the team to the task of managing the context and managing the spec. That way I get input from different specializations, and I'm able to sit above all of them and make the decisions I would normally make as a team leader or CTO. Managing the context, keeping the specification documents tight and neatly organized, and what you choose to connect up and bring in as a skill while you're working through it. So every time you put in a skill, every time you connect an MCP server, you're occupying some small piece of context. What you don't want to do is say, here's the rest of the documentation and all of the code and all of the customer support tickets and expect it to come out with logical decisions about what is going to move your product forward and what is not. So managing the context is a skill that you need to train your teams on. There's now tools within OpenAI, within Claude, that show you what's in your context as you're working with it. There's also some innovative stuff happening to, G keeps reminding me about keep my token count down, that do a good job of showing you what's in context and helping you make fine-grained decisions, taking that out of the model's hands. Intent, huge. How many folks have heard of the paperclip apocalypse thought experiment? Anybody? Got a couple of paperclip fans. Nick Bostrom, 2003, philosopher, computer science, posed a question. What happens if we write an AI and tell it that its mission is to make paperclips? What will it do? It will start making paperclips. And when it runs out of steel to make paperclips, it'll start taking things apart to make paperclips. And once the humans try to stop it from making paperclips, it'll sideline them and continue making paperclips until the entire planet is turned into paperclips. What did we fail to do? We failed to express our intent. It's critical that as part of your application spec, as part of the processing of the information, that it's not just click here, do that. It's why we're there. What are we trying to accomplish? That's meaningful to the context and meaningful to your downstream engineers. So some key takeaways, and then I'll wrap this up here. Iterate on the spec, not the code. It's the cheapest place to iterate. And with the tools we have now, we can actually do it. I just feel like I've finally fulfilled the dream of being an engineering manager. Derive everything, he got it. Derive everything downstream. I didn't write a single JIRA ticket. The presentation I'm showing you, I didn't write this. It was Gamma. It was marked down to Gamma. Anything you need to present to your management team, your customers, it all can be derived from the specification. Use your LLM as a multiplier, not a change agent for change's sake. The skills that you need to teach your team: prompting, context engineering, intent, specification. I was joking with Vlad, we need to get everybody speed reading lessons. Simple task of reading is a critical skill now. I'm not saying go read a 200-page spec, but you still need to digest what the LLM's telling you and make good decisions. So teach your team how to do that. And everything we're talking about now is starting from the specification. Yeah. Last point I wanted to make. Nate B. Jones, anybody a fan? YouTube channel, Nate B. Jones? Every day, there's something new. I think he's AI too. The quote here is, AI is enforcing a communication discipline that the best leaders have always practiced intuitively, and now everyone needs it in order to be effective. And that is lived experience for me. I'm going to pause there for questions, and then we're going to transition here.
what I take heart in is that the fundamentals of product development are still very much true. Product management is extremely hard, and I feel like all of us, right, our partnership with you on the product side and our stuff on the engineering side, we're all moving up the stack, right? I feel like the engineering manager who's going to be monitoring and owning that app spec is coming up into your world so that you can go out to the market, see what's possible, keep us focused, and we can go and slay dragons together. But I think you're 100% right. It's going to be a lot, and we got to be focused. Yeah, great question. All right, this is not the end, but we're going to pause here. Thank you, everyone. This is fantastic. Love talking to you.